The whip cracked over Fenna's shoulders as she leaned into the harness, her bare feet sinking into spring mud that sucked at her ankles with every step. The leather straps bit into her chest and around her ribs, distributed just enough to keep her upright as she dragged the iron plow through the waterlogged field. Behind her, the foreman shouted something cruel about mule strength and orc hide, and the farmhands laughed from their position by the fence where they stood dry and amused. She did not have the breath to answer. The furrow stretched ahead, another 100 yards before she could turn, and her thighs burned with the effort of pulling free from the mud only to sink again with the next step. The morning had started before dawn. They always did. The farmer who held her indenture papers rented her out to anyone who needed heavy work and did not want to spend money on a proper draft animal. Fenna cost less than feeding a horse. She slept in a lean-to attached to the barn, ate the scraps they threw her way, and worked until her muscles screamed. The indenture was 15 years old now. She had been 7 when her mother signed it to pay a debt Fenna still did not understand. Her mother had died 3 years later. Fenna had 12 years remaining on papers that might as well have been written in iron. The plow blade caught on a root. She staggered, fell to one knee, and the foreman's whip found her back. She tasted blood where she had bitten her tongue. She pushed herself up and threw her weight forward. The root snapped. The plow lurched onward. Mud coated her legs to the knees, her arms to the elbows. Her tusks ached from clenching her jaw. Sweat ran into her eyes despite the cool morning air. She heard hoofbeats but did not look up. Travelers passed on the road sometimes. They never stopped. But these hoofbeats slowed, then halted. She kept walking. The foreman's voice changed pitch, took on a false politeness. "Morning, sir. Fine day for plowing, is it not? That is a person in your harness." The voice was low and quiet, but it carried across the field like the ring of a hammer on steel. "Oh, her, just an orc, sir. Rented her fair and square from her holder over in Millbrook. She is strong as any ox, I promise you that. Release her, now." The foreman laughed uncertainly. "Sir, I have paid for her labor through the end of the month. I have the contract right here if you want to see it." Fenna reached the end of the furrow and stood there swaying, chest heaving. She turned her head enough to see the man on the horse. He sat tall in the saddle, broad-shouldered and still, his dark hair touched with gray at the temples. His face was weathered in the way of men who worked outdoors, lines carved around his mouth and eyes. Those eyes were fixed on the foreman with an expression she could not name. He dismounted in one smooth motion and walked toward her. The foreman hurried to intercept him. "Sir, truly, there is no need for concern. She is well fed and strong. Look at the work she has done already this morning. We could not get this field ready in time without her." The man brushed past the foreman as if he were not there. He stopped in front of Fenna and met her eyes. His were brown, she noticed, dark brown like turned earth. He reached for the buckle at her chest. His fingers worked quickly, releasing the straps. The harness fell away. She swayed again without its support, without the weight pulling her forward to balance against. He caught her elbow, steadied her. "Can you walk?" he asked. She nodded. Her voice came out rasping. "Yes." "Then walk away from this field, do not come back," the foreman sputtered. "Now see here, you cannot just take rented property. I will have the law on you, I will. I know my rights." The man turned. "Your rights do not include harnessing a person like livestock. If you believe otherwise, take it to the magistrate. I will be happy to meet you there." He pulled a purse from his belt and counted out coins without looking at them, his gaze still locked on the foreman. "This covers the rest of your rental period and then some. Consider our business concluded." The foreman took the coins, weighed them in his palm, and his protest died. He nodded once sharply. "As you say, sir, no harm meant." He turned and shouted at the farmhands to get back to work. They had fences to mend, and the moment deflated into ordinary morning labor. The man looked back at Fenna. "You need water, food, a place to sit." She shook her head. "I need to return to my holder. If I am not back by nightfall, he will add days to my indenture." "You will not be going back." He said it with the same quiet certainty as before. "Come with me." She did not know why she obeyed, perhaps because no one had ever told her she did not have to go back. Perhaps because her legs were shaking so badly she was not sure she could make the walk to Millbrook anyway. Perhaps because when he turned and started toward his horse, he did not grab her or give orders. He simply trusted she would follow. He mounted and offered her his hand. She stared at it. "I am covered in mud. So is my horse. Come on." She took his hand. He pulled her up behind him with surprising strength. She had to wrap her arms around his waist to keep from sliding off, and she felt him tense at the contact, but he said nothing. He nudged the horse into a walk, heading not back toward the road but across the fields toward a farmstead she could see in the distance. The house was modest but well maintained, the barn sturdy, the fences straight. Fields stretched in every direction, most still fallow but a few showing the green shoots of winter wheat. He helped her down in the yard and led her to the well. He drew up a bucket and poured it into a trough, gesturing for her to wash. She scrubbed the mud from her arms and legs, splashed water on her face. He watched from a careful distance, then nodded toward the house. "I will bring you something to eat. Wait here." She sat on the edge of the trough and tried to think. This made no sense. Men did not buy out rental contracts for orcs they did not know. Men did not offer food and water to creatures they considered little better than animals. She waited for the trick to reveal itself, for him to bring out chains or new papers with her name on them, or a list of debts she now owed. He returned with bread, cheese, and cold chicken on a wooden plate. He handed it to her along with a tin cup of water. She ate slowly, watching him. He leaned against the well and looked out over his fields. He did not speak. She finished the food and set the plate aside. Her voice still rasped. "Why did you do that?" "Because it was wrong." "That is not a reason." "It is the only one I have." He finally looked at her. "What is your name?" "Fenna, Fenna Voss. Harrison Drake." He said it simply, without title or flourish. "I own the land bordering that field. I ride past it most mornings. This is the first time I have seen someone harnessed to a plow like that. It will not be the last. My holder rents me out 3 or 4 times a week." "Not anymore." She almost laughed. "You bought out one day. He still holds my papers. Then I will buy those too." He said it as if purchasing a person's indenture was no more complicated than buying a sack of grain. "Where is he?" "Millbrook. But he will not sell. I have 8 years left, and I bring him steady money. He would be a fool to let me go. Everyone has a price." Harrison pushed off from the well. "Wait here. I will be back before dark." He rode out before she could argue. She sat in the yard as the sun climbed higher and tried to decide whether to run. But where would she go? Back to Millbrook, where her holder would beat her for the lost workday. Into the forest where she would starve or freeze. She had no money, no skills beyond hard labor, no friends who would hide her. So she stayed. She washed the plate and cup at the pump and left them on the doorstep. She walked the perimeter of the yard, testing the strength in her legs. The fields rolled away on all sides, freshly plowed in some places, wild with last year's stubble in others. It was a sizable holding. He worked it alone, she guessed, seeing no other buildings, no signs of farmhands. He returned as the sun touched the horizon. He dismounted and pulled a rolled parchment from his saddlebag. He handed it to her without preamble. She unrolled it and stared at the crabbed handwriting, the official seals, the signatures at the bottom. Her indenture, marked paid in full. She looked up at him, the parchment shaking in her hands. "How much? Does it matter?" "Yes." He named a sum that made her stomach turn over. She had brought her holder perhaps a fifth of that over the years, probably less. Harrison had paid 4 times what she was worth by any measure. She tried to hand the papers back. "I cannot accept this. I will never be able to repay you. I am not asking you to." "Then what do you want?" He took the papers and rolled them carefully. "I want you to decide what happens next. You are free. These papers are void. You can go wherever you want, do whatever you want. If you want to stay here, I have work that needs doing. I will pay you a fair wage. If you want to leave, I will give you enough money to get started somewhere else. It is your choice." She sat down hard on the ground. The tears came without warning, hot and fast. She pressed her palms to her eyes and tried to stop them, but her body betrayed her, shaking with sobs that hurt her ribs. She heard him move and then felt his hand on her shoulder, light and uncertain. "I am sorry. I did not mean to upset you." She shook her head, unable to speak. He crouched beside her and waited. Eventually the tears stopped. She wiped her face on her sleeve and looked at him. "I have nowhere to go, then stay. I do not know how to be free. Neither did I once." He stood and offered his hand again. She took it, let him pull her to her feet. "You will learn. It takes time, but you will learn." He led her to the barn and showed her a small room at the back, fitted with a cot, a stove, and a table. "It is not much, but it is warm and dry. You can stay here as long as you need." He paused at the door. "There is a latch on the inside. Use it. No one will bother you here." She stepped inside and looked around. The room was simple but clean. A quilt lay folded on the cot. A lantern hung from a hook on the wall. It was hers. The thought made her dizzy. She turned back to thank him, but he was already walking away across the yard, his shoulders squared against the evening wind. She latched the door and sat on the cot. It did not creak. The mattress was stuffed with straw, but it smelled fresh. She lay down, still fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling. Sleep did not come. She kept waiting for the door to rattle, for him to come back and explain the real cost of her freedom. But the night stayed quiet except for the sounds of the barn settling and the wind in the eaves. Morning came gray and cool. She woke to the sound of a rooster crowing and lay still, trying to remember where she was. Then it flooded back. She sat up and unlatched the door. Harrison was already in the yard, hauling buckets to the trough. He glanced up when she emerged. "There is porridge on the stove in the house. Help yourself." She hesitated. "What do you want me to do?" "Eat breakfast. After that we will talk." The house was tidy inside, sparsely furnished but comfortable. The porridge sat in a pot over the fire, thick with oats and honey. She ladled some into a bowl and ate standing at the window, watching Harrison work. He moved with economy, no wasted motion, a man used to doing everything himself. She washed the bowl when she finished and went back outside. He was mending a section of fence. He looked up as she approached. "How are you feeling?" "Sore, but I can work." "I am sure you can, but that is not what I asked." She considered. No one had ever asked her that before. Strange, like I am waiting for something bad to happen. "That will pass." He handed her a hammer. "Or it will not, and you will get used to the feeling. Either way, you are safe here." He nodded at the fence. "Hold this post steady while I nail it." They worked through the morning without much conversation. He explained what needed doing and let her figure out the rest. She was strong, she learned quickly, and she did not shy from the work. By midday they had finished the fence and moved on to mucking out the barn. He worked alongside her, not supervising but laboring, and she found herself relaxing into the rhythm of it. This was work she understood. What she did not understand was the absence of cruelty. Over the next week, she waited for him to show his true intentions. But he paid her at the end of each day, counting coins into her hand, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He took his meals in the house and left her to eat in her room. He spoke to her with the same steady courtesy he might use with anyone. When she cut her hand on a broken board, he cleaned and bandaged it without comment. When a rainstorm blew in and soaked them both, he told her to go dry off and heat water for tea, and he joined her later, handing her a cup without meeting her eyes. She began to believe he meant what he said. The realization left her unmoored. She had spent 15 years bracing against the weight of her indenture, and now that it was gone, she did not know how to stand upright without it. She caught herself deferring to him, asking permission for things she did not need permission for, and he noticed. "You do not need to ask if you can eat an apple, Fenna. If you are hungry, eat. I am not used to taking without asking. This is not taking. You work here, you live here. What is mine is yours." He paused. "That sounded wrong. I mean you have as much right to the food as I do." She almost smiled. I understood. Spring deepened into early summer. The days grew longer and warmer. They plowed the remaining fields together, Harrison guiding the ox while Fenna harrowed behind. They planted oats and barley, and she learned the careful geometry of spacing seeds, the way to judge soil moisture by touch. He was a patient teacher. When she made mistakes, he showed her how to fix them without reproach. She began to notice small things about him. The way he always checked the animals before he saw to his own comfort. The care he took with tools, cleaning and oiling them before he put them away. The stillness in him, as if he carried some great weight quietly. One evening as they sat outside watching the sun set, she asked, "Why do you farm alone? Most men your age have families." He was quiet for a long moment. "I had a wife. She died 6 years ago. Fever took her in 3 days. I am sorry. So am I." He leaned back against the fence. "We were going to have children. Fill this house with noise. She wanted a garden full of flowers. I keep meaning to plant one for her, but I never seem to find the time. I could help if you wanted." He looked at her surprised. "You know flowers, my mother did. She taught me a little before she died." It was the first time she had spoken of her mother to him. The words came easier than she expected. She loved sweet peas and foxglove. She said they reminded her of home. Where was home? I do not remember. I was very young when we came south. She pulled her knees up to her chest. "What was your wife's name?" "Clara." He said it softly. "She would have liked you. You do not know that." "I do." "She believed everyone deserved kindness. She would have been furious about what happened to you." He stood and brushed off his trousers. "I will see if I can find seeds next time I am in town. We can plant that garden." He went inside, leaving her alone with the darkening sky. She sat for a long time, thinking about dead wives and lost mothers and men who bought freedom for strangers. She thought about the way he said her name carefully, as if it mattered. She thought about the tightness in her chest when he smiled, rare as it was. She recognized the feeling and pushed it away. She could not afford to want more than she had. But the wanting stayed, quiet and persistent as the evening stars. The garden went in a week later. Harrison brought back packets of seeds from town along with news that made his jaw tight. "I heard talk while I was there about you." She stopped digging. "What kind of talk?" "The angry kind. Your former holder is telling everyone who will listen that I stole his property. He is stirring up trouble." "What will you do?" "Nothing. Let him talk. You are free. The law agrees. He can complain all he wants." But his eyes stayed troubled, and she knew it was not that simple. The trouble came a week later. She was in the garden pulling weeds when she heard riders approach. 3 men on horseback, her former holder in the lead. His name was Garrett Mills, and he was a narrow man with a narrow face and eyes like chips of flint. He dismounted and looked around the yard as if assessing its value. "Where is Drake?" "In the north field." "Fetch him. I will wait. She did not move. You can fetch him yourself if you need him. His hand shot out and grabbed her arm, fingers digging in. You will do as I say, girl. I still own you no matter what papers he waved around. Let go of me. Her voice came out level and cold. She was not 7 anymore. She was not small, and she was done being afraid of him. He raised his other hand to strike her, but a voice cut across the yard. Touch her and lose the hand. Harrison stood at the corner of the barn, a pitchfork in his grip. He walked forward slowly, and there was something in his posture that made Garrett release her and step back. The other 2 men shifted in their saddles, uneasy. Harrison stopped a few paces away. You are trespassing, Mills. State your business or leave. My business is her. Garrett pointed at Fenna without looking at her. That indenture you bought was fraudulent. I never agreed to sell. The magistrate in Millbrook disagrees. I have the papers. They are legal and binding. Then I will take it to the county court. I will have that sale overturned. You cannot just buy up indentured orcs and set them loose. There are laws. There are. And those laws say an indenture must be entered into voluntarily by someone of legal age or by a guardian with proper authority. Fenna's mother was coerced into signing. The debt she was paying never existed. That makes the indenture void from the start. Harrison's voice stayed calm, but his knuckles were white on the pitchfork handle. If you want to take that to court, I welcome it. We can air every detail in front of a judge. I wonder how that will look for you. Garrett's face flushed. You have no proof of coercion. I have Fenna's testimony. I have witnesses who remember your threats to her mother. I have records showing the debt you claimed was never recorded with the county clerk. Harrison took a step forward. Drop this, Mills. You have already lost. The 2 men behind Garrett exchanged glances. One of them cleared his throat. Maybe we should go, Garrett. This sounds like a mess. Garrett spun on them. You are with me or against me. We are going home. The man turned his horse. The other followed. Garrett stood alone in the yard, his face mottled with rage. He looked at Fenna, then at Harrison. This is not over. Yes, Harrison said quietly. It is. Garrett mounted and rode out without another word. Harrison waited until the hoofbeats faded, then set the pitchfork aside. He looked at Fenna. Are you hurt? She shook her head. Her arm throbbed where Garrett had grabbed her, but it was nothing. Is it true about the indenture? Yes. I had a solicitor look into it when I bought your papers. The debt your mother supposedly owed was invented. Mills used it to trap her, and when she died, he kept you anyway. Why did you not tell me? I wanted to be sure first, and I did not want to give you hope if I was wrong. He rubbed his face. I am sorry he came here. I thought he would let it go. Men like him never let go. They only get louder. She looked toward the road. Will he really take it to court? He might. If he does, we will fight it, but I do not think it will come to that. He knows he has no case. He is just trying to save face. Harrison picked up the pitchfork and turned back toward the barn. Come on, we have work to do. But it did come to that. A summons arrived 2 weeks later, delivered by a clerk from the county seat. The case would be heard at the circuit court in 6 weeks. Garrett was challenging the sale and the validity of the indenture's cancellation. Harrison read the summons twice, his expression unreadable. We need a solicitor. That will cost a fortune. I have money. You have spent enough on me. He looked up and his eyes were fierce. This is not about money, Fenna. This is about what is right. If we lose this case, you go back to him. That will not happen. You cannot promise that. Watch me. He folded the summons and put it in his pocket. I will ride into town tomorrow and find a solicitor. In the meantime, we need to gather evidence. Names of anyone who knew your mother. Records of work you did for Mills. Anything that shows how he treated you. They spent the next week building the case. Harrison tracked down former neighbors, men who had worked alongside Fenna. even the foreman who had whipped her in the field. Most were reluctant to speak against Mills, but Harrison was persistent. He paid them for their time, listened to their stories, and wrote everything down in careful script. Fenna told him things she had buried for years. The beatings, the threats, the way Mills had refused her mother medicine when she was dying. Harrison's face went still as he listened, but he did not interrupt. He only asked questions, clarifying details, building a picture. The solicitor he hired was a sharp-eyed woman named Ruth Calloway who rode out from the county seat to meet them. She listened to everything, asked her own questions, and nodded slowly. "You have a strong case. Mills overreached, and the original indenture was clearly fraudulent. But you need to understand something. The court will not want to set a precedent that makes it easy to challenge indentures. They will look for reasons to rule in Mills's favor." "Why?" Fenna asked. "Because if your indenture can be voided, others can too. There are powerful people who rely on that system. They will not want it threatened." Ruth looked at her directly. "This will be ugly. They will say terrible things about you, about orcs in general. You need to be ready for that." "I am ready. We will see." Ruth stood. "I will file our response and start taking depositions. Be prepared to testify. And Mr. Drake, you will need to explain why you involved yourself in this. The court will want to know your motives." "My motives are irrelevant. In a perfect world, yes, but this is not a perfect world. If they think you are a troublemaker or a radical, they will dismiss you and everything you say. You need to be beyond reproach." She gathered her papers. "I will be in touch." After she left, Fenna and Harrison stood in the yard, the weight of what lay ahead settling over them. He looked tired. She wanted to tell him he did not have to do this, that she could disappear, save him the trouble and expense. But she knew he would not let her. And if she was honest, she did not want to disappear. She wanted to stay. She wanted this farm, this quiet life, this man who treated her like she mattered. The realization was a stone in her chest, heavy and solid. "You should rest," she said. "You have been working too hard." "So have you. I am used to it." He smiled faintly. "That is not the endorsement you think it is." He started toward the house, then stopped. "Fenna, whatever happens in that courtroom, you are not going back to Mills. If the court rules against us, we will appeal, and if that fails, we will leave. I have cousins out west. They would take us in." "You would leave your farm." "I would." He said it simply, and she believed him. "Land can be replaced. You cannot." He went inside before she could respond. She stood in the yard as the sun set, turning his words over in her mind. "Land can be replaced. You cannot." She pressed her hands to her face and breathed slowly. She could not let herself hope. Hope was dangerous, but it bloomed anyway, stubborn and bright. The weeks before the trial passed in a blur of work and preparation. Ruth came out several more times, coaching Fenna on how to testify, what to say and what to avoid. Harrison spent hours going over documents with her, making sure every detail was correct. In between, they kept the farm running. The oats ripened. The garden flourished. Fenna planted the sweet peas and foxglove she had promised, and they climbed the fence in a riot of color. One evening, Harrison came out to find her sitting among the flowers. He sat down beside her, careful not to crush anything. "It is beautiful. Clara would have loved it." "Do you still miss her, every day?" He plucked a blade of grass and twisted it between his fingers. "But it is different now. It does not hurt the way it used to. I can remember her without feeling like I am drowning." "What changed?" He glanced at her, then away. "You did." Her heart kicked against her ribs. She did not know what to say. He stood before she could find words. "I should check on the animals." She watched him go, the words he had not said hanging in the air between them. She wanted to follow him to ask what he meant, but fear held her in place. What if she was wrong? What if he only meant she had distracted him, given him something to focus on besides his grief. She could not bear the thought of laying her heart bare only to have him step back, kind but distant. The day of the trial arrived hot and still. They rode to the county seat in Harrison's wagon, Ruth meeting them at the courthouse steps. The building was imposing, all stone and tall windows. Inside, the courtroom smelled of old wood and dust. The judge was an older man with a gray beard and tired eyes. Garrett sat at the opposite table with his own solicitor, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit. Garrett did not look at Fenna, but she felt his presence like a hand on her throat. The trial took 2 days. Garrett's solicitor argued that the indenture was legal, that the debt had been real, that Fenna had been treated well, and Harrison had overstepped by interfering. He called witnesses who swore they had seen Fenna well-fed and unharmed. The foreman from the field lied and said she had asked to be harnessed, that it was easier on her than walking behind a plow. Fenna sat and listened and felt her hope crumbling. Then Ruth called her witnesses, the neighbors who remembered Mills threatening Fenna's mother. The clerk who confirmed no debt had been recorded, the men who had worked alongside Fenna and seen the bruises. Harrison testified about the morning he had found her in the harness, his voice steady but his hands clenched on the rail. Fenna testified last, telling her story in a voice that shook but did not break. She met the judge's eyes and did not look away. The judge took a day to deliberate. Fenna and Harrison waited in a small inn, neither of them sleeping. Ruth came by in the morning and told them the judge was ready. They walked back to the courthouse through streets that felt too bright, too loud. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Word had spread. People wanted to see how this would end. The judge cleared his throat and began to read. The indenture was void. The debt had been fraudulent. Garrett Mills was ordered to pay restitution to Fenna for 15 years of unlawful servitude. The sale of the indenture to Harrison Drake was upheld as legal, though the judge noted it was now a moot point since there was no indenture to sell. Fenna was free, had always been free. The courtroom erupted. Garrett surged to his feet, shouting. His solicitor grabbed his arm, trying to quiet him. The judge banged his gavel and called for order. Ruth turned to Fenna and Harrison, her face carefully neutral. That is the best outcome we could have hoped for. Fenna could not speak. Harrison's hand found hers under the table, his grip warm and solid. She held on and tried to breathe. They left the courthouse through a side door to avoid the crowd. Outside, the sun was too bright. She stopped on the steps and looked at Harrison. It is over. It is over. I do not know what to do now. Neither do I. He smiled, and it reached his eyes this time. We will figure it out. They rode back to the farm in silence, the enormity of what had happened settling over them. When they arrived, Harrison helped her down from the wagon and stood there, his hands still on her waist. Fenna, there is something I need to tell you. Her mouth went dry. What is it? I bought Mills's field, the one where I found you. She stared at him. Why would you do that? Because it was for sale, and I did not want anyone else working it the way he did, and because I thought. He stopped, started again. I thought you might want it as your own. I do not understand. He reached into his coat and pulled out a rolled parchment. He handed it to her. She opened it with shaking hands. A deed for the field with her name on it. Fenna Voss, sole owner. She looked up at him, tears blurring her vision. Harrison. It is yours, no strings, no conditions. You can sell it or farm it or let it go fallow. It is your choice. He stepped back, giving her space. I know it is the place where you suffered. Maybe you do not want it, but I thought perhaps you would like to take something back, to own the ground you bled on, to make it yours. She could not stop the tears. They came hot and fast, and she did not try to hide them. She clutched the deed to her chest and looked at him through the blur. Why are you so kind to me? Because you deserve kindness. Because he hesitated and she saw the war in his eyes. Because I care about you. More than I should, probably. More than is wise. Harrison, you do not have to say anything. I just needed you to know. He turned toward the barn. I will tend the animals. Wait. She crossed to him in 3 strides and took his hand. You are not allowed to say something like that and walk away. I did not want to make things awkward. Too late. She laughed, shaky and breathless. You care about me. Yes, I care about you too. I have for weeks. She tightened her grip on his hand. I did not say anything because I thought you were just being kind. I thought I was imagining things. He stared at her. You were not imagining things. Then why did you not say something sooner? Because I am a coward. Because I did not know if you felt the same. Because. He stopped and looked at her, really looked at her, and the softness in his face made her breath catch. Because I was afraid of ruining this. What we have. I did not want to lose you. You will not lose me. She released his hand and cupped his face, feeling the scratch of stubble under her palms. I am not going anywhere. He kissed her then, tentative at first, then deeper when she leaned into him. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and she felt the tension drain out of him. She kissed him back with all the hunger and hope she had been swallowing for months. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I have wanted to do that for a long time. So have I. They stood there in the yard, holding each other as the sun dipped toward the horizon. Eventually, he pulled back enough to look at her. What do you want to do with the field? She looked at the deed still clutched in her hand. Farm it with you if you want. I want. Then we need to talk about how to join the properties, where to put fences, how to manage the workload. We will figure it out. We will. She smiled. Together. They did. Over the next weeks, they walked both properties, making plans. They decided to tear down the fence between the 2 fields and create one large holding. They planted winter wheat together, working side by side. In the evenings, they sat in the garden and talked about the future. He told her about his childhood, growing up on a farm much like this one. She told him about her mother, the little she remembered. They found a rhythm, easy and comfortable, punctuated by stolen kisses and long nights learning each other, but the countryside did not accept the change easily. Neighbors who had tolerated Harrison now refused to trade with him. The general store in town turned them away. Someone burned a fence post on the property line and left a note warning him about consorting with orcs. Harrison read the note, crumpled it, and threw it in the fire. Ignore them. They will get used to it. What if they do not? Then we will find people who will. He pulled her close. I am not giving you up because small-minded fools cannot see past their prejudice. You could lose everything. I already lost everything once. I survived. I will survive again. He kissed the top of her head. Besides, I have you now. That is worth more than all the rest. The harassment continued sporadically. Someone trampled a section of the oat field. A cart they had ordered was never delivered. But slowly, grudgingly, a few neighbors started coming around. The blacksmith's wife brought them bread one day, saying quietly that what the judge decided was good enough for her. A young farmer down the road asked Harrison for advice on rotating crops and did not flinch when Fenna joined the conversation. It was not acceptance, not really, but it was a start. Winter came, cold and hard. They spent long evenings by the fire, planning for spring. Harrison taught Fenna to read, painstakingly going over letters and words until she could make her way through a newspaper. She taught him songs her mother had sung, her voice rough but earnest. They were happy. It was a strange, fragile happiness, built on the ashes of everything they had lost, but it was real. One night in midwinter, Harrison set down the book he had been reading and looked at her. Fenna, I need to ask you something. She looked up from the shirt she was mending. What is it? Marry me. She dropped the needle. What, marry me? He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I know we have not been together long, I know people will talk, but I do not care. I want you here not just as a partner in the farm, but as my wife. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to build a life with you, a real life. He paused. If you want that too, of course I want that. She set the mending aside and crossed to him. Yes, I will marry you. He stood and kissed her, deep and thorough, and she felt the last of her walls crumble. When they broke apart, she was laughing. When, spring, after the planting, we can have the ceremony here in the garden, nothing fancy, just us and whoever wants to come. Your neighbors will disapprove. Let them. I am done living my life for other people. He took her hands. I love you, Fenna. I should have said it weeks ago, but I am saying it now. I love you. I love you too. She said it fiercely, meaning every syllable. I have loved you since the day you gave me that deed, maybe before. They spent the winter making plans. Harrison rode to the county seat and arranged for the ceremony. Fenna sewed a dress from fabric Ruth helped her choose, pale blue with white embroidery at the collar. They sent word to the neighbors, not expecting many to come but inviting them anyway. Harrison's cousins wrote back saying they would make the journey. Ruth said she would not miss it for the world. Spring arrived in a rush of green and warmth. They planted the fields together, working long days to get everything in the ground. The garden bloomed, sweet peas and foxglove and roses Harrison had bought as a surprise. The morning of the wedding, Fenna woke to find him already gone. She found him in the garden, setting up benches. He smiled when he saw her. You are not supposed to be out here. It is bad luck. I do not believe in luck. Neither do I. He crossed to her and kissed her forehead. How are you feeling? Terrified, happy, both. That sounds about right. He took her hand. It is going to be a good day, Fenna. It was. The ceremony took place in the garden at midday, the sun warm on their shoulders. A circuit preacher performed the service, his voice carrying over the assembled guests. More people came than they had expected. The blacksmith's wife and her husband. The young farmer from down the road with his sister. Harrison's cousins, 4 of them, loud and welcoming. Ruth, elegant in a green dress. Even a few of the men who had testified at the trial, awkward but sincere. Garrett Mills was not there. No one spoke his name. When the preacher asked if they took each other, they answered together. I do. Harrison slipped a ring onto her finger, a simple band of gold that had been his mother's. She had nothing to give him in return, but he shook his head when she apologized. You are enough. They kissed, and the gathered crowd clapped and cheered. Someone started playing a fiddle. Tables were brought out, laden with food the neighbors had contributed. They ate and drank and danced as the afternoon stretched into evening. Fenna found herself pulled into conversations, welcomed and congratulated. It was not universal. Some neighbors had stayed away. But enough had come that she felt, for the first time, like she might belong. As the sun set, she and Harrison slipped away to stand at the edge of the fields, looking out over the land that was now theirs. Both properties joined, both names on the deed. She leaned into his side and he wrapped his arm around her. Thank you, she said. For what? For seeing me. In that field, for stopping. I could not do anything else. He kissed her temple. You were always worth stopping for. They stood there as the stars came out, the sounds of the celebration fading behind them. The fields stretched away in the darkness, full of promise. They had planted them together. They would harvest them together. And whatever came next, they would face it the same way together. The years that followed were not easy, but they were good. The farm thrived under their joint care. They expanded slowly, buying adjacent parcels when they came up for sale. They hired help during the busy seasons, young men and women who needed work and did not care that one of their employers was an orc. The neighbors grew used to seeing them together, and the hostility faded into grudging respect. In their second year of marriage, Fenna realized she was pregnant. She told Harrison one morning over breakfast, watching his face carefully. He went still, his fork halfway to his mouth. Then he set it down and crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. "Are you sure?" "Yes." He held her for a long time, not speaking. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were wet. "Clara and I tried for years. I thought I could not." "Apparently you can," he laughed, shaky with relief and joy. "We are going to have a baby." "We are." The pregnancy was uneventful. Fenna worked through most of it, slowing down only in the final weeks when her belly made it hard to bend. Harrison fussed over her, bringing her water and snacks, insisting she rest. She tolerated it with good humor, knowing he needed to do something. The baby came on a cool autumn morning, delivered by the blacksmith's wife who had helped birth half the children in the county. A girl, healthy and loud, with green skin and her father's brown eyes. They named her Alina. She had tiny tusks and pointed ears and a grip like iron. Harrison held her and wept. Fenna watched him with their daughter and felt something settle in her chest, a contentment she had never thought possible. They were a family. Alina was 2 when Fenna realized she was pregnant again. This time Harrison took the news more calmly, though his grin threatened to split his face. "Another one, apparently. We are going to need a bigger house." They built an addition over the winter, adding 2 bedrooms and a larger kitchen. The second baby was a boy, born in early spring. They named him Finn, and he was as calm as his sister was energetic. Alina was fascinated by him, wanting to help with everything. Harrison taught her to be gentle, and Fenna watched them together, her heart full. The farm became known in the county as a good place to work. They paid fair wages and treated everyone with respect. Other orcs began to find their way there, looking for employment or just a safe place to rest. Fenna and Harrison never turned anyone away. They built more housing, creating a small community on the edges of the property. It was not a solution to the prejudice that still existed, but it was something. By the time Alina was 10 and Finn was 8, the farm was one of the most productive in the region. Harrison had taught both children to read and write, and Fenna made sure they knew how to work with their hands. Alina wanted to be a farmer like her parents. Finn was more interested in books and numbers. They let both children follow their interests, encouraging them without pushing. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the children play in the yard, Fenna leaned her head on Harrison's shoulder. "Do you ever regret it, stopping that day?" "Not for a single moment, even when it was hard, especially then." He took her hand, his thumb tracing the ring she still wore. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Fenna, you and the children, this life. I would not change any of it." "Neither would I." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the fields they had planted together. The land that had once been the site of her suffering was now the foundation of their happiness. She thought about the girl she had been, harnessed and hopeless, dragging a plow through the mud. She thought about the man who had stopped and seen her as a person worth saving. She thought about the long road from that moment to this one, paved with hard work and stubborn love. The deed to the property hung framed in their bedroom, both their names written in careful script. Fenna Voss and Harrison Drake. Equal partners. Equal owners. It was a small thing, a piece of paper, but it meant everything. It meant she belonged. It meant she was home. Alina called out, asking them to come see something she had found. Harrison stood and offered Fenna his hand. She took it, letting him pull her to her feet. Together they walked down the porch steps and across the yard to where their children waited, the evening light golden on their faces. This was the life they had built from ashes and hope. This was the family they had created against all odds. This was the happiness they had earned, and it was more than enough.